Hello everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Unstoppable Dad Project. Appreciate you joining me here for another week on this little podcast that I have going on here. Please make sure you're subscribed on whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on, Apple, Spotify, Google. You will be able to find the podcast on all those podcast platforms by you subscribing and also giving us a 5-star rating. It helps the podcast continue to get out to more people like yourself who hopefully find some value out of what it is that I am doing here. You can also find the video version of the podcast released every Wednesday on our YouTube and Facebook pages. So jump on there, give those a like, give those a follow, and please continue to share this around with anybody who you think may get some value out of the topics that I am covering off in this podcast every single week. Now, I wanted to talk about this last couple of months. I've done quite a few episodes where we've spoken about confidence. We've spoken about self-confidence, and it's obviously a reoccurring topic that comes up with a lot of people that I coach, because coming from a health and fitness background, people generally start to implement some form of training regime because they want to improve their self-image and their self-confidence. And we can get into a whole Pandora's box about things that people should be aiming for based off where they are in their life and how maybe they shouldn't be tying up their self-confidence in their body image or in their self-image, but that's not what today is going to be about. And one thing that I've been thinking about over the course of the past week is a single way that you can look to improve your confidence. Now, obviously, the very first thing, and I've spoken about this on an episode a few weeks ago, is you got to keep your promises to yourself. I think that's number one. If you're saying you're going to do something and you're not following through on it, that is probably the single most surefire way to chip away at your confidence. And that goes for keeping your promises to yourself. It also goes for keeping your promises to other people. But if we were to go one step further than that, and we were to start talking about, once you are actually following through on the things that you're saying you're going to do, how do you continue to grow your confidence, whether that be in that thing that you're trying to get better at or that you're starting to do, or it just be in life. And one thing that I've been coming back to is doing more than the minimum. And the reason I've been coming back to that is I was having a conversation with my daughter the other day, and she was talking to me about her homework. Now, we have to sign off on her homework to say that she's done the homework that she said she's going to do. There's things like reading that they're expected to do. And some of the reading that they're expected to do, they're given a particular book, and they have to read X amount of pages out of the book. And she's come to me and she said, I've done my 4 pages or whatever it is. Can you sign off on this for me? I'm like, yep, no, that's no worries. And I asked her, I put the question to her, why didn't you do 5? And she kind of paused for a minute. She's like, oh, and didn't really have an answer for me. And I'm like, what about with your writing and with the other areas of your homework? Like, are you just going and are you just doing the minimum requirement? And she said, yes, which is fine, which is great, right? It's at least she's doing it. At least we don't have to push her to do it. She's doing it off her own will. So we've got, we're not fighting an uphill battle with that side of things. And the reading side of things was a little bit of a loaded question from our point of view, because we've read to our kids every single night since pretty much they were born. And she's at the point now where she will read not a homework book, but another book pretty much to us every night. So we know she's doing a little bit extra on that particular activity, which when I asked her about the reading, she actually came back to me and she said, but I read the other book, the Harry Potter book. She's right into Harry Potter at the moment. I read Harry Potter every night as well as the other book. I'm like, that's great. And I didn't want to, when it came to reading, just to kind of tailor off onto a different topic, I want reading to be an enjoyable thing for our kids. I want them to find enjoyment in it. So we're not going to force her to do any extra reading of things that she doesn't want to read when we know that she's doing extra reading outside of things. And it's the same with her writing. She likes writing little stories for herself. So like the minimum requirement that she's doing for her homework, we know that she's doing extra outside of there just because we know that she's doing something she enjoys, so she's doing extra on that activity. So she's doing more than the minimum. But then we started to talk about other things. She does other sports and things like that. And we started talking about, doing other things outside of practice. So doing more than the minimum. And she posed the question to me and she goes like, why is that important? And I said, it's important because it's going to make you better. It's going to separate you from other people that are doing the same thing, because there are a lot of people in this world who just get by doing the bare minimum. They don't do the extras outside of that. And we went back and forth and we had a fairly deep conversation, as deep as you can have with an 8-year-old, just about applying ourselves to the things that we do every day and doing a little more than what is expected of us. And I actually walked away from that conversation with probably a little bit more than what she does. And that's the remarkable thing about having kids. Kids have this remarkable way, even though they don't see it, of teaching us things and highlighting things in our life that are probably very, very important. And when I went away and when I thought about the conversation that we'd had about doing that extra and not just doing the minimum, that really fed back into some of the topics that I've covered off over the last couple of weeks when it came back to confidence, because I truly believe when you're doing a little bit more than the minimum requirement, you are going to increase your level of confidence around that thing. You're going to increase if you're learning something and you're doing a little bit extra than the required amount of learning that you should be doing, you are going to increase your knowledge around that particular situation. If it's something like training where you're doing a little bit extra after the session, and the little bit extra might be stretching, it's going to enhance your recovery, which is going to allow you to do more work. It might be doing a little bit extra stability work, or whatever the case might be. If it's a sport, if it's like, say, for example, going back to jiu-jitsu, it might be sitting on the mat after and unpacking a little bit more than what you went through in the class, rather than just getting your bag and leaving. Now, this isn't going to happen all the time, but doing that little bit extra and not just doing the minimum requirement, I believe, is really the second step to try and massively increase your confidence, because then all of a sudden, not only are you increasing what you're capable of, but you're building that track record to yourself that not only can I stick to what I've told myself I'm going to do, or stick to that expectation I have of what I'm doing, I can actually do a little bit more. And then with that, your expectation may grow, and then you keep doing a little bit more and a little bit more. And what happens is we start to build confidence around this thing. And I think also you can go the other direction, whereas if you're just doing the minimum, and you're right on that borderline of, hey, I'm just doing enough to get by here, we can sometimes always feel like we're looking over our shoulder and like we haven't done enough. And that can sometimes feed our insecurity. It can feed our anxiety. We can start to feel, imposter syndrome around that particular activity or that particular thing that we're doing. And all of a sudden, like, the thing that may have been enjoyable to us starts to not become enjoyable because we're not living up to the minimum standard that we're putting on ourselves for that thing. And doing more than the minimum is a surefire way to not only help you feel more confident, but get you more capable. And that is the thing that, and we probably went down a rabbit hole, too much of a rabbit hole when we were talking about it with the 8-year-old, and it's something that it's probably a conversation that she won't remember, and it's something that I'm sure we'll have to cover off. But I think from the point of view of if you are an employee, just doing a little bit more than what's expected of you is probably going to set you apart from the other people in the company. If you're a business owner, doing more than what you expect of yourself is only going to help and grow the business quicker. Whereas just doing like the minimum each day to get by, while some weeks you're going to need to do that for your own mental health and well-being, and sometimes we just need to tick the box, then doing that little bit extra is going to help grow quicker and going to help you get better results. Like, this is all tied into doing a little bit more than the minimum. But the big thing that when I think about it and I think about doing more than the minimum, you think about going just a little bit longer than other people to try and separate yourself, to try and give yourself a little bit extra. And yes, the results are going to come quicker and things like that, but I have a very high expectation of myself. So if I'm getting a task given to me that I'm expected to complete, I want to do that well, and I want to almost under-promise and over-deliver. So the expectation is the under-promising. I'm going to do that little bit extra to take it to that next step and take it to that next level to try and hopefully yield a better result within whatever it is that I'm doing. And that's the thing. That's the thing that really stuck out to me, is we can get by doing the minimum. And I think that if we do that in one area of life, that can start to bleed into the other areas of life. And sometimes by just doing the minimum, or even not quite doing the minimum, that is going to have some adverse effects that we don't even think about. It is going to chip away at our confidence, going to chip away at our own personal insecurities, and almost force us to constantly be looking back over our shoulder. Because if someone comes and checks that work, and it's not done to the standard that they expected, then, that's going to come down on the person that's doing the work. Whereas if we're doing that little bit extra, it's going to help feed into our confidence, it's going to help feed into our capability, and it's going to start to get us to where we want to go quicker, just because we're doing that little bit extra. We're reading that one extra page. We're writing that one extra page. We're doing a little bit more than what we are expected to do, and couple that with doing what we say we're going to do when we're going to do it. I think they're the two major things that are going to help build self-confidence for somebody. So let me know what you think. Let me know if that's something that, because there's been areas in my life, right, where I can look at certain things and certain times where I've just gotten by and I'm just doing the minimum. I'm just doing enough to make sure that the box is ticked and I'm moving forward. And I can see all these. There are also times where if I look at them objectively, I do have a lot of feelings of feeling a little bit insecure, a little bit of imposter syndrome. Like, all those things are kind of tied into those times. Whereas if I look at the times where I'm like, I'm doing, I might set a goal for myself. And this isn't just doing the minimum that other people expect for us. This is doing the minimum that we expect from ourselves. One thing that I've been doing over the past couple of months is I've been setting myself aside. I'm going to do 20 minutes of dedicated learning every night. And what I mean by that is it's 20 minutes sitting. If it's watching a video, I'll sit in front of the video with a notebook and I'm writing notes. Like, I'm actively learning. I'm not just consuming content. I'm actively learning a new skill. So I'm going to sit down. And then sometimes, I might watch a video and it might be 18 minutes. And I could call it quits right there and just leave it at that. Or I could go and watch another video. And yes, it's not doing 20 minutes. Maybe it's doing 25. Maybe it's doing 30. But I've done a little bit more than that minimum that I've expected for myself. And there's going to be times where I'm going to leave it at that 18 minutes. Maybe I'm overly tired. I haven't slept well. Maybe the kids have been sick and I need to just dial it back. I've still done the task. But what I'm aiming for is, more often than not, I am trying to do more than the minimum to move myself forward quicker. I am doing more than the minimum expectation that I set for myself. And that's something that feeds into my confidence around that particular thing I'm trying to learn, or that activity that I'm doing. And that's helping me grow as a person and grow as a human being. And I think it will do the same for you as well too. Simply by just doing more than the minimum expectation that someone else has for you, or that you have for yourself, can really, really help not only fast track your results, but grow that confidence. So let me know what you think. Let me know if that's something that comes up in your lives, or even your kids' lives. Like, is it a conversation that you've had with your children about just doing enough to get by, or doing that little bit more? Because I think this is a big part of parenting as well too, trying to set our kids up for success in the future. Take care. Thanks so much for listening. Hope you have a great week. I'll see you next week. Goodbye.